Xin mời quý vị theo dõi sau đây những hình ảnh tưởng niệm cựu đại tá Paul Jacob, là người đã cứu trên 32.000 người Việt Nam trên Biển Đông sau ngày 30 tháng 4 năm 1975.
Phương Hà xin kính chào quý khán giả. Thưa quý vị, và hôm nay chúng tôi lại trở lại với cái buổi nói chuyện đặc biệt với những người mà gọi là nhân chứng sống sau cái cuộc đổi đời năm 1975 với một người là và sau đây thì chắc là nhờ Trần Anh giới thiệu từng người đến cho quý vị khán giả một lần nữa.
Vâng, kính chào quý khán giả. Hôm nay chúng ta thêm một người nữa, thêm một nhân chứng sống trong cái buổi sau ngày 30 tháng 4 năm 1975. Đây là một thủy thủ của Hải quân, là thuộc cái đoàn USS Kirk. Ông tên của ông ta là Chipman. Ông là một trong những người đã giúp cho 30 mấy ngàn người Việt Nam của chúng ta trong cái thời điểm 30 tháng 4 lên chiếc tàu và có những câu chuyện thật là cảm động. Thì kính mời quý vị theo dõi hôm nay. Xin mời Đại Thi.
Dạ, cảm ơn.
Tên của ông là Chipman. Good evening, Mr. Chipman.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And next to Kent Chipman is Mr. Paul Jacob. Paul
Yes.
Jacob is the captain of the USS Kirk.
Yes.
And you're here today to tell us about the events, what happened during that day.
That's correct.
And next to Mr. Jacobs is Mr. Jan Herman, and you're a historian of the U.S. military, Navy
The
medical.
Navy
Yes.
Medical Department.
Dạ vâng, và thưa quý vị, và cái người mà đang ngồi mặc một cái bộ uniform rất là đẹp và trước mặt quý vị đây, đó là ông Chipman. Ông là một thủy thủ đã làm việc trong cái thời gian mà cái chiếc tức là mình gọi là chiến hạm USS mà có tên là Kirk. Mr. Chipman, can you recall what happened and what did you see, what you saw on 1975? What were your duties on that day?
Well, we stood our regular watch and then just stood ready for any event that may occur. And the biggest event was when the big Chinook came out and hovered over our fantail. It couldn't make it out to the bigger ships and hovered right over our fantail, and they dropped the people out, babies, women, and we caught them in our arms as they hovered over the fantail about 10 foot above our heads. And then the captain, or the pilot of the Chinook, took it over and ditched it, and he dove out the side and we pulled them out. Everybody just was ready to assist in any way they can. It'd be real quiet for a long period of time, and then the sky would fill full of helicopters, and we'd land them and take people out as quick as we could and shove it over the side and bring another one in. It was periods of real calm, and then all of a sudden just chaos, and then also anything that would float or fly was coming out, and we'd take all the people out. And
When you mentioned the Chinook dropping people off,
yes,
you said 10 feet in the air,
In the air.
just dropping people off.
yes, it
And
hovered.
you were down on the ship catching them?
Yes, it hovered above us. It was too big to land on our small ship. We was on a little destroyer, and it was too big to land on our ship, and it couldn't make it to the bigger ships. And it hovered over the back of the ship 10, 15 foot above us, and they dropped the babies out. And I was one of the volunteers and went out there under the helicopter as it was hovering. It was loud, you couldn't hear
Dạ vâng,
anything. I was just looking up and catching them.
Do you know how many people on that Chinook?
No, the captain just recently told me 12 people.
Dạ, dạ. Vâng, thì thưa quý vị, thì ông nói rằng những cái chiếc mà tàu bay mà Chinook đó hả, họ không có thể nào mà họ có thể là đậu xuống một cái chiếc tàu mà nó hơi nhỏ đối với cái chiếc máy bay đó. Vì vậy cho nên là ở trên đó họ cứ thả những cái trẻ em xuống, mà như vậy là cao của khoảng là 10 feet là cũng là cao lắm, phải không? Và ông là người phải giơ cái bàn tay ra mà hứng. On the babies, no adults.
No, there were babies and adults. I caught one small baby and then a small woman. I don't know how old, but a small woman I remember. Wasn't very big, but as an adult.
Yeah, and how do you feel? How did you feel at that time?
What is your first reaction
Yeah.
to do that?
Well, our ship always had a helicopter on board for anti-submarine defense, and I was used to running out as one of the guys that chained the helicopter down, so I'd been out under a helicopter,
Mm.
Oh.
but you know, it would land on the fantail and we'd go out and chain it down. Well, I was used to the noise, but when it was hovering above us and they started dropping people out, I was amazed that I was able to catch them and not drop them, but I caught them. I
Because
didn't
you were
drop
not trained to catch people like that.
no. I couldn't believe, I caught them. I said, oh, I got them, and they didn't hit the deck. And I ran back and then ran back out there to catch another, and the noise was just tremendous, and the wind from the helicopter, you couldn't hear, or, it was it's one of the biggest helicopters made, the big Chinook CH-47. And then the pilot took it off our starboard side and hovered right over the water, had the tires touching the water, and he flipped it up, and as he was flipping it up, he dove out the side, and when the blades hit the water, they went flying off, and I just knew somebody was going to get killed from the blades, but they went away from the ship. It was the events, the way everything happened, there was somebody watching over.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm
You
sure.
know?
Vâng, anh Việt.
He actually caught the pilot's son, 4-year-old son. And the Navy is headed up to interview that family. We located that family,
Wow.
and they'll expected to come to the reunion.
Captain Jacob, can you tell us what's the mission that time?
When we were assigned to about 5,000 yards off the embassy to provide naval gunfire support, and our expectations were we were going to see a lot of people trying to escape, but we never thought we would be taking on helicopters and pushing them over the site. We were a darkened ship, and enough Vietnamese were coming aboard, climbing up off small boats and getting aboard that I decided to turn the Grimes liner, which is a oscillating light, because there's so many helicopters couldn't find a place to land, and got one of the Vietnamese up into CIC to communicate to the helicopter that he could land on our deck one at a time, and then we would take them on, take all the people off, all the pyrotechnics, and push it over the side to get ready for the next one. We landed 16 of them, I think, something like that.
Was it a dangerous mission for you to be hanging
Well,
around
well,
the water at
we-
the time of the war?
Yeah, we could have got shot at. We could have.
Oh, yes.
See, but the guy that really we're looking for is that young enlisted guy who stood on that flight deck when helicopters were hitting each other and didn't move, because he was landing a pilot on a moving deck, and the pilot was watching him motion that plane down, and when one hit the other, he didn't flinch because he saw women and children on that plane.
So USS Kirk is still in Vietnam territory or
No, it's
international territory?
the United States Navy sold it to Taiwan,
Oh.
and we are connected to that ship, and we're probably going to invite some of the Vietnamese, some of the Taiwanese officers to come to the reunion in 2010 because they have a big portrait of the Kirk to give them.
Well, at that time you rescue people like that, and then you try to catch all of them. Did anybody you drop and then die? Couldn't catch it?
Well, some of them hit the deck, I don't know if we had any broken bones, but we had a lot of guys hit their face on the deck and things like that. So.
One lady sprang her ankle,
Right.
but
But no fatalities?
no, it's quite
That's
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah.
The scariest, and I can't believe no one got hurt, is when we had shipped on either side of the hangar trying to save the helicopter, take them back. They're expensive. Well, another bird came in, what the captain was saying, and the blades hit the back of the other helicopter, and I was standing back there with a fire hose. You always have a fire hose ready on either side of the hangar on the flight deck, so if a fire breaks out, you can immediately respond to the emergency. And when the blades hit the other one, it was just stuff flying everywhere, and the noise was tremendous. It sounded like 3 car wrecks happening at the same time, and nobody got hurt. Now, why? It's amazing. I know somebody, that a higher power was watching over us to go through that, and nobody got hurt.
We actually had holes, shrapnel holes in the flight deck hangar window
Yes.
on either side of McClellan, who was standing there.
Yes.
How do you plan to feed the people with about 30,000 people on a?
That was a good question. We took on it was 100-degree heat, and we got a Mike 8, which is about 8,000, about probably 40,000 pounds of rice, and we brought the rice to the end of the ship in 60-pound bags. And the bosun mate, like some of our Filipinos don't weigh 100 pounds, and they were moving 60-pound bags of rice into the deck. They'd pass out, the bosun mate would hose them down and get back in the line there, and we unloaded that boat in 30 minutes. Then we have to pass the rice down into the whaleboat and get it over to the ships, so we feed them, and that's how we move rice and water.
Chúng ta vừa nói chuyện với ông Ken thì ông kể lại là ông đã cứu được, ông đã hứng được một số trẻ em và người lớn trên chiếc máy bay, những chiếc máy bay trực thăng mà thả xuống như vậy. Thì có một vài người cũng có gãy tay gãy chân một chút, nhưng mà ai cũng an toàn tính mạng, không sao cả. Và ông thuyền trưởng Jacob cũng mới vừa kể với chúng ta là chiếc tàu của ông đã đem rất là được thức ăn và thực phẩm tới cho người tị nạn trên tàu, cũng như là chiếc tàu của ông cũng rất là lo sợ đã bị Cộng sản Việt Nam bắn vào tàu, dù là ông đang ở hải phận quốc tế lúc đó, nhưng mà ông đã cố gắng hết sức để mà cứu được 30 mấy ngàn người Việt Nam vào cái ngày 30 tháng 4.
And when you rescued the Vietnamese refugee like that, did you get any order from the government?
No, this was all. First of all, the evacuation of the Vietnamese Navy wasn't even part of the operation order. It was me going alongside the 7th Fleet Admiral's blue ship, a Blue Ridge, and getting a verbal order to go back to get them. There was nothing written.
Yes.
Just do the best job you know how. And I got a call from him, I guess in 2003, and wanted to speak to my medical staff, and I laughed. Said we only.
How long the Vietnamese people on your ship?
They were on the ship probably for 30 April to 7 May till we deposited them in Subic Bay.
So it's not too far. So
Yeah, but it was the water was as flat as that table the entire time, and I've never seen that in 15 years I've been over there.
Mr. Herman, you are the historian of this event.
Yes.
How are your feelings when these stories were told to you?
Well, it's quite a privilege to have interviewed many of the people who took part in this operation, both former sailors and crew and officers of the USS Kirk. Getting to know them, getting to be part of their. I guess I'm an honorary member of the USS Kirk now. Captain Jacobs is my skipper. He's my captain now. But I've also had a chance to talk to many of the Vietnamese who were part of that operation and who were rescued, and to hear their stories firsthand, stories that many of them have never told before, not even to their children. So now they have an opportunity to tell the story of what happened back in 1975. And as a historian, I have the opportunity to tell many other people the story of what happened with the Kirk and saving all these refugees. So it's quite a privilege to be part of this project.
And when you try to find out what happened, and you will tell the whole world the truth about the Vietnamese, and how do you feel? How do you feel about those people try to escape from the communists to search for freedom, and they rather die on the sea rather than to live with the communists? How do you feel about that?
Well, the risk they took, many of these people, refugees often don't know where they're going. They leave their countries for a number of reasons. In the case of Vietnam, the communists were going to take over. No one knew what would happen to them, whether they would be executed, whether they'd be imprisoned. And they decided freedom was more important than anything else. And so they made this bid for freedom by either going in small boats or getting on helicopters, and many of them said they would rather die than live in Vietnam under communism. So they took tremendous risks, many of them. Many of them didn't make it, obviously.
Yes.
The people that I've been dealing with are those lucky ones. We call them the lucky few. That's the name of our film. It will be called The Lucky Few, the documentary we're making right now. But they consider themselves lucky, and certainly the ones who ended up on the USS Kirk were the luckiest of the lucky few because of the way they were treated, the way they were ushered to freedom across the South China Sea, and all the stories you've heard about the South China Sea being calm for 10 days, perfectly calm, very unusual. The fact that no one was injured when these helicopters collided. The fact that the pilot of this Chinook was able to get all his people safely aboard the Kirk. The most serious injury was perhaps a sprained ankle. And the fact that they were all able to get to the Philippines is just a miracle. And it certainly does speak for a higher power looking after the welfare of the crew of the Kirk and the Vietnamese that they saved.
Beside the USS Kirk, do you know any other ship?
Oh yes, we were the first ones on the scene, and I think about 12 hours we had most of those ships underway headed east, and then the next morning the USS Cook, which is a sister ship to the Kirk, she was a 1083. He came down, and we used their corpsmen, a lot of their people, and then we had several other ships come down within the next day. The Air Force dropped 55-gallon drums of medical supplies, everything from diapers to kaopectate, to you name it. And if it wasn't flat, we'd have a hell of a job getting those 55-gallon drums into the whaleboat. So guys would get in the water and push it up.
Dạ vâng, thì đây là một cái cuộc mà cứu người vượt biển đó, phải không? Dạ vâng, rất là cam go, và các ông cũng đã kể qua những cái câu chuyện đó. Và thưa quý vị, và nếu mà quý vị nào mà đang xem cái chương trình này mà quý vị muốn liên lạc với những cái người mà nhân chứng sống, nhất là ông Jacob, là ông là thuyền trưởng của chiếc chiến hạm Kirk, và cũng như là ông Shipman là một người thủy thủ đoàn đã cứu những người ở trên cái chiến hạm đó, cũng như là ông Herman, ông là một sử gia mà ông cố gắng đem những cái sự thật mà những người tị nạn nghĩa là chạy trốn cái thiên đường gọi là thiên đường cộng sản đó đã trải qua những cái giây phút cực khổ như thế nào. Thì how people can contact you, you know, after this show?
Quý vị khán giả nếu mà có mặt trên chiếc tàu hoặc là có biết tin về những người tị nạn trên 32 chiếc tàu đó, xin liên lạc với ông Jacobs hoặc là ông Herman qua địa chỉ USS Kirk 1087@yahoo.com, tức là chữ USS KIRK 1087@yahoo.com. Xin kính chào quý vị.
Thì Nhi xin kính chào quý khán giả và kính thưa quý vị, chúng tôi xin mời quý vị cùng nghe đài phát thanh Saigon Dallas 1600 AM bất cứ nơi nào, bất cứ ở đâu, rất tiện lợi và dễ dàng bằng cách quý vị có thể download một cái application trong cell phone của quý vị, click vào App Store và click on Search, và quý vị có thể đánh vào Audio Now và quý vị lấy tay đẩy xuống hoặc kéo ngang qua lại, quý vị sẽ thấy logo của đài Saigon Dallas 1600 AM và quý vị click on logo, click Get và Install. Với app logo này có hai option để quý vị có thể nghe đài phát thanh Saigon Dallas 1600 AM, đó là nghe live hoặc nghe qua phone, rất dễ dàng, bất cứ lúc nào, bất cứ ở đâu, bằng application trên chính những chiếc phone của quý vị.
Vâng, Thu Nga xin kính chào quý khán giả khắp nơi, chào Đăng Khoa, Khôi Nguyên và Quang Hưng.
Saigon Dallas Radio.com, quảng cáo trên làn sóng Saigon Dallas 1600 AM. Địa chỉ 10935 Extay Lane, phòng 180, Dallas, Texas 75238. Điện thoại 214 389 2563, 214 389 2563.